Greetings all, D&Disability here. Here's a more casual series where I'll pick out some of the monsters from RPGs past and present and see where they fit within the disability spectrum. The goal here isn't really to point out anything problematic. Rather, it's to show you, DMs and players, how that these monsters can utilize their disability-adjacent characteristics to create realism in your game. Right? And that said, let's dive into one of my favorites, the Cyclops. So, Greek myth really describes the Cyclops through the perspective of Polyphemus, who lives in this kind of cave upon a hill, right? Our initial description reads as follows. Upon arrival, right at the edge of the land beside the sea, we saw a high cave overhung with laurel, the home of several herds of sheep and goats. Around the cave was built a lofty courtyard of deep-set stones with tall pines rising up in lofty peaks. There lived a massive man who shepherded the flocks all by himself. In this instance comes from the Odyssey, of course. My translation is by Norton and Company. But the Odyssey continues on the page 246 and 47 for those following along. We were soon at the cave, but did not find the Cyclops. He was pasturing his flocks. We went inside and looked at everything. We saw his crates weighed down with cheese and pens, crammed full of lambs divided up into newborns, middlings, and those just weaned. Polyphemus, as we all know, I guess spoilers for a 4,000-year-old story, is blinded, right? He's blinded by what's called a branch, right, of an olive tree. It's more likely like the shaft of an entire tree for someone that's 20 feet tall. And we all know this story, right? They slip out under the sheep while the Cyclops is blinded, and Odysseus quite cleverly, calls his name back out at Polyphemus once they are out to sea, and that leads to Odysseus being effectively hunted down by Poseidon and punished for blinding his son. So, with the myth and, of course, the mythical characteristics of this creature out of the way, let's look at some modern interpretations, right? First things first, 5th edition and D&D Beyond. Cyclopses are, quote, one-eyed giants that eke out a meager existence in wild lands. They're terrifying threat in combat due to their size and strength, but they can often be tricked by clever foes. And 5th edition makes the mistake, in my opinion, of giving them disadvantage on attacks, meaning they roll 2d20s and take the worst on opponents more than 30 feet away, so basically any ranged attack. Now, let's look at a different interpretation. Here's one from Osric. Cyclops are extremely tall, ugly humanoids, each with a single eye centered under its slightly drooping brow. These oafish, antisocial creatures prefer to inhabit lonesome environs such as out-of-the-way or otherwise deserted islands. And Osric limits their ranged attack to 60 feet with boulders, but I think that's mostly a strength limitation, not so much a visual limitation, as opposed to the 30 feet from 5e. So, as a monster, what does this mean? Well, it means Cyclops are huge man-eaters with semi-limited intelligence. In the Greek world, they could domesticate animals, but did not actively farm, and therefore were uncivilized, not to mention the fact that they were, people-eaters. However, as evident by the baskets, crates, and other objects mentioned, Cyclops could craft items. They knew how to produce cheese. They were likely to produce other dairy products as well. They might even cultivate wild olives, as evidenced by the olive branch / olive tree that would become Polyphemus's walking stick. They don't build homes or produce complex items, but their intelligence does enable them to effectively use the environment around them. So I don't think they're nearly as oafish as Osric might have us believe. That said, how do we roleplay this? They have a singular eye, which most likely means they have limited depth perception. This gives them a penchant for melee over ranged combat, which is simple enough. However, you can also describe a Cyclops as searching with its fingers for objects. Have them reach out tentatively rather than just snatch if they are in a conversation or within their cave. They don't want to accidentally break something. Save the snatch and grab the violent actions for combat. Speaking as someone who only has one eye and has limited depth perception, I'm much more inclined to reach gingerly for a glass or reach for something without even looking because my hands memorize things and where those things are. Think of it like keybinds on your keyboard, right? Further, Polyphemus, or other Cyclops, might use walking sticks to help judge distance, so they don't stumble or fall. They'd be keenly aware and can adjust for their lack of depth perception. I've done this, my whole life, and that's why many visually impaired individuals use canes. Thus, you don't really treat a Cyclops as if it was blind or if it could only see 30 feet. Rather, have them use their clubs to swing low to the ground, sweep the ground, because it doesn't matter if you stand there and try and bash one person when you can just sweep your club across the ground and hit 3. Yes, it makes them scarier, but that's also kind of the point. Also, consider how well their hearing and smell might be. Consider letting your party overwhelm the Cyclops with loud noise or kind of choking smoke. So, to clarify here, when I say I can see out a certain distance and that this, 60-foot, 30-foot limitation on Cyclops is kind of absurd, what I mean to say is I can see quite accurately out to about 50 feet, fine details, that kind of thing. Can't read. Right, but that's neither here nor there. I can still hit a man-sized target at 50 yards with a longbow. And that's, easily doable for a Cyclops and a boulder. That's 150 feet. So, and I would also argue that I am blinder than any Cyclops. Anyway, DMs. Take what we've covered here. Show your players that Cyclops aren't just these kind of blind, oafish monsters. They may be inhuman man-eaters. They may not be as smart as your average person, being able to be tricked by Odysseus. Show them that they can craft items, use items they've stolen, right? And that get rid of this base ranged limitation. It doesn't make much sense to me when you can chuck a boulder the size of my head or chest sufficiently fast enough that 30 or 60 feet of distance isn't going to put a great curve on that arc. Alright, y'all. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please catch me next week for my next video. Remember to like, share, subscribe if you'd like to see more. Let me know down in the comment section below what monsters you'd like to see me touch on next. I've heard one outcry for unicorns. I heard one outcry for mind flayers, and so I don't know. But by all means, I'm always happy to give my 2 cents. Take it easy, guys.